We've just conked out.
The great rod race has just come to a grinding halt, folks.
Anybody could conk out.
Well, this is it, Nick, Furnace Mill Fishery, and we've come here to catch another one of the carp variants, which is a species, or not a separate species, but it's a variant called the ghost carp. Now, the ghost carp is an odd-looking fish. It's a fairly pale version of the carp, very distinctive in its appearance. And I think the problem we're going to have today is not so much catching carp, it's actually catching the one that we want.
Yeah.
Well, this one's called the Mucky Meadow Pool, and it's named after the famous Mucky Meadow on the River Severn at Bewdley. And I reckon, Nick, these are the two swims that we should fish. I mean, it doesn't matter which we go on. One of the most important skills in fishing is plumbing the depth, because most fish feed on the bottom or near the bottom. And when you come to these commercial fisheries, there's a lot of fish in them, but they are heavily fished. And as a result of that, what tends to happen is the fish become quite shy biting. So getting your float set at exactly the right depth is very important, and so too is shotting the float right down. Now, the way to plumb the depth is to use a thing called a plummet. Basically, it's almost like a little bell, and underneath it's got some cork. So you pass the hook through the hole in the top of the plummet there, and then literally embed the hook in the cork like that. The next thing to do is to lower the plummet in where you're going to fish. Now, I'm going to fish very close in here on this lake, just beyond the marginal shelf. So I'm going to lower the float in, and you can see automatically that the float is lying on the surface of the water, and it tells me basically that the water there is shallower than I've got my float set. Let's just try a bit further out. Now you can see the float's now standing up, so that tells me we've got a slope there in the margin. But I want to fish very close in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove some of the depth from the float and bring it down, let's say 3 or 4 inches, and try again. And there it is, perfect. So I know that that is the exact depth of the area of the swim that I'm fishing. Now, if you lay too much line on the bottom in these fisheries, you'll get little dips on the float, but the float won't submerge. If you fish too far off bottom on many occasions, you won't get the bites off the bigger fish. So again, dead right is very, very important. Well, as you've probably gathered, we've moved round to the other side of the lake simply because we've seen so many fish moving over here. Now, what I think's attracting them is a small outflow and mixed fishing right next to it now, where there's some fresh water entering the lake, and that kind of oxygenation of the water often attracts fish to it. So if you're going to fish commercial waters, always pay attention to any water coming into the lake. As far as feeding's concerned, I'm just going to give you a bit of advice, really. I've got a bit of a secret weapon up my sleeve. If you fish commercial fisheries, it's always worth fishing with cat meat. Now, cat meat's a very underrated carp bait. There are lots of brands that you can buy. It does catch a lot of fish. The sort of brands you're looking for are the ones with good, firm, meaty chunks. You don't want the stuff in jelly, and you don't want stuff that's going to disintegrate on the hook. And I've also got with me some corn and some hemp. Here's the advice about feeding. You'll often hear it said that when you're fishing you should feed little and often. In other words, small amounts of bait quite frequently, and that's good advice. But on commercial fisheries where you've got a lot of fish and you've got the bigger fish down on the bottom, you need to get the bait down on the deck, and the way that you do that is to feed fairly big handfuls of bait. And I'm going to throw in a few decent handfuls of each bait to the area that I'm going to be fishing. 3 or 4 of hemp, probably just 1 of sweet corn, and then with the cat meat, a few lumps of meat. That's perfect. Mick.
Did you see it roll then,
I
Matt?
did, yeah, I just saw it roll, yeah, it looks a beauty.
I'm just hoping it doesn't go towards that aerator.
No, you'll be alright now, I think. Great fishing, isn't it?
I'm having a bit of trouble holding on to this one. Head's out in the water. Yes! Oh, she's in. Just about fits in there. Well, that was fantastic. They told me these furnace mill can't fight, but that was unbelievable. Right, I'll get it up onto this soft bit of grass here just to take a close look at it. Quite a chunky old fish as well. And there's the hook, right in the end of the snout. Well, there it is. It's not the ghost carp we're after, but it's a mirror carp of probably 7 or 8 pounds or so, in excellent condition. Absolute fighting fit. Oh, I can hardly hold on to it. It's a real chunky little fish. But we've caught one of them before, a much bigger one. I better put her back in the water. There she is. A rather quick return, but I couldn't do much about it really.
Now, I wonder whether this one's a ghost carp. Another nice fish though.
Oh, Matt's just caught a perch. Anybody can catch a perch.
Well, that one went off with a fair old speed, didn't it? There it is. Another solid, chunky little fish.
I wonder if this is the ghost carp, Matt. Well, I've just got a glimpse of it, and it's not the one we're after. This one's ready for the net. Pristine little common carp.
The most important thing when you're playing a fish like this is to let the tackle do the work. That's what it's designed for. So try and use the rod as a spring. And don't be in too much of a hurry to bring the fish in, because these commercial fishery carp are real good scrappers. Gotcha.
I could happily do this for a few weeks.
I can tell it's not a ghost carp.
I'm just beginning to wonder how many of these we've got to catch before we get a ghostie.
Well, we've caught plenty of carp, but we're adopting really what you might call the blunderbuss approach. We're just trying to literally fire as many things at the target as we can and hoping one of them will come up trumps. And it ain't working, quite honestly. So what we're going to do is we're going to try the rifle shot. Now, we've seen fish drifting around on the surface of the pool, and some of them are ghost carp. So how about this? We're going to get some floating dog biscuits, and we're actually going to fish for these fish on the top and cast at the ghosties. That's what we're going to do.
There's one over there, isn't there? See it?
Yeah.
It's quite a big one, actually.
Yeah, good fish.
I think this is a good move, actually, because we've wasted a lot of time, really.
Now, this is a tactic that I've used here before to catch the carp on the surface. And believe it or not, Mick, they love the chum mixers here, but they're quite shy of them.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've found that using a proper fly,
Yeah.
once you've got the carp feeding on the surface, you can actually use a proper fly to target them.
They're going to prefer a bit of old fluff to a tasty old dog biscuit.
Sometimes they have. I don't say they prefer it, but they actually seem to take the flies more confidently.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they are used to taking flies in this pool. Remember, we're right here in the wire forest. You know, it's a beautiful spot. And the thing is, quite often there's flies and things dropping on the surface of the water.
So it's a natural thing for them to do, really.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I've got a selection of carp flies here in this box. There's all sorts, including things like hoppers, daddy longlegs, hawthorn fly imitations, the sort of things that actually get blown onto the surface of the water.